Hello, I'm Dr. John Cruz, and on today's Facebook Live, I'm going to be talking about procrastination, or maybe we can put that off till next week. No, seriously, I'm going to be talking about procrastination. It's a huge problem for many people with ADHD. It's certainly a problem for many of the rest of the world as well. So this is, when I started looking into this and reading about it, one thing that surprised me was how prevalent procrastination is, because I'm used to taking a history when I meet people, and whenever it strongly resonates with them that, yes, I procrastinate in high school and college and jobs and work, I think right away, ADHD. But actually, studies suggest among students and among in the workplace, somewhere between 50 to 90% of people, depending on how they're defining it, procrastinate on tasks, and approximately 25% of people are chronic procrastinators. So that's far larger than the proportion of people with ADHD. So let's start out by most of the researchers define procrastination as delaying and doing a task that you know has some future deadline and that there will be some negative repercussions from delaying on it. So why do people procrastinate, or what are the other, if it's not just ADHD, what other reasons might people procrastinate? And researchers have looked at lots of different explanations. There's certainly procrastination is more common among those who are depressed. If you don't have energy or motivation to do anything, you're going to put things off. Anxiety, feeling worried, and particularly worries about how good perfectionism, how good the product or project you're working on is going to be, and not willing to release it or even engage in it if you can't do the very, very, very best you can do are issues. Certainly the perfectionism ties in with shame as well, and indecisiveness plays a role as well. So the factors that are certainly sort of ADD specific, and it doesn't mean other people can't have them, but that are there's several. So, and actually procrastination is one of the 18 points that the diagnostic manual uses for identifying ADHD. Curiously, they describe it, or this point is someone who chronically avoids tasks that require sustained mental effort. And one of the things that strikes me as strange is that actually what's characteristic about ADHD is procrastination isn't just with hard projects. Procrastination occurs in every project. People procrastinate on moving their car on the day that's street sweeping, even though they know they could go out and do it now. They're going to wait till the last minute, and often they forget. Moving the car isn't something that takes sustained effort or particularly sustained mental effort. So I think that criteria for ADHD actually needs to be sustained or not sustained, expanded and broadened to not just tasks requiring sustained mental activity, but actually a whole range of tasks people procrastinate on when they have ADHD. So some of the factors important with ADHD, one is something called temporal discounting. And that is sort of what's going on now, what's going on in front of you is what's important and big, and something that's, let's do a day later, let's do it 3 days later, even if it has big rewards if you do it well, or big repercussions if you do it poorly. That just doesn't resonate as strongly with someone with ADHD. So there's a discounting of future events in ADD that contributes to procrastination. Second factor is there are time management issues. We know people with ADHD have trouble estimating how long a certain task is going to take them. They have trouble estimating how long they've just spent on a task. So if you can't manage time well because they're not measuring it well or recording it well, that's going to make it easier to procrastinate. And distractibility is certainly another huge factor, that if you have 6 or 7 things in front of you and moving the car or reading the book for the book report is one that you're supposed to be doing, but that cat video is more interesting, or your brother's story about losing his, dwarf rabbit in the thunderstorm last week is more interesting. You're going to be doing that rather than doing the work you should be doing. And one particular realm that the procrastination takes on its own flavor in many people with ADHD is many people actually actively procrastinate, purposely put off to the last minute, because they need that time pressure. They need the immediacy to make the task important enough to do it. So we've talked before that many people with ADHD are more interest driven. They do what's interesting to them rather than what's important. So delaying until you're close to the deadline is a way of making it so important that you can't delay it any further or ignore it any further. So probably that's enough about why people procrastinate. I'm going to jump into what I've put together over the years as a simple 4-point formula for dealing with procrastination. All the pieces of this have been tested in different research venues, but I've sort of culled them and collected them into my own little 4-point model, which I call the spawning a solution to procrastination. And spawning, because the 4 points are S for schedule, P for prepare, W for wants, and then for no negatives. So I'm going to explain what this means. So the first step is if you have a task that you need to do, scheduling a specific time to do this. I know this follows strongly from my last week's talk on scheduling, but you are far more likely to get something done if you say, I'm going to do it at 2 o'clock today, rather than if you can say, oh, I'll work on that this afternoon, or I'll work on it later, particularly, because if you look at your calendar, your schedule, do you see later anywhere on there? Later doesn't exist, it never arrives. But if you say a specific time, you're far more likely to get it done. And again, just writing it down is a form of making a commitment to yourself, making it clear. So when you are scheduling it, again, in line with what I was saying last week, I would generally recommend not blocking off more than an hour at a time. I mean, if you know this is a 3-hour task, make it 3 1-hour blocks. If you know your attention span shorter than that, do it as several 45-minute blocks or whatever you can manage, but don't expect yourself to sit down and plow through 3 hours of sustained thought or focus on a task. And do spend some time thinking about what the task requires in terms of when your reserves, when your resources are at their maximal. So optimize the scheduling so it works for you. It doesn't conflict with meals, sleep, other activities. And if it needs to engage or interact with other people, that it incorporates their schedules. So number 1 is schedule. Second point is P is prepare ahead. So you want to be ready to go when you have at the scheduled time for your task. There are many tasks that require absolutely no preparation or minimal preparation. If you've been procrastinating on calling your grandmother because you know she's has different political views than yours, and yes, you really love her and want to connect with her, but you dread talking to her, and you've been procrastinating, there's probably no prep work at all. So if it's on the calendar, you're going to do it. Other tasks, though, may require substantial amounts of prep work. Some might require a minimal amount or minimal. So if your task you're procrastinating on is going to the gym, and you've set the time for 2 o'clock for going to the gym, but at 2 o'clock you are looking for your gym clothes, your lock, your sneakers, and you spend 40 minutes doing that, you've eaten up your window of opportunity. So the prepare ahead part is do whatever it is you need to do to be ready to go on the time that you've scheduled for the task. Sometimes if the prep work's big enough, you may actually need to make a separate task of the prep work and schedule that. So 1 is schedule, 2 is prepare ahead. And then 3, and this is sort of the pivot point to the whole plan, is the W. The W is for wants and focusing on the wants. So what usually happens when you've scheduled something, particularly something you're dreading? What happens is you see, at 3 o'clock, I'm supposed to sit down and write that report. And your first thoughts are, I'm too tired, that's too much, it's too boring, I don't really feel ready, I don't want to do it. All the negatives come up first. What's the second thing? If your brain tries to rally or resist against it, what comes up is, I need to do it, I have to do it, I should do it, I ought to do it. And if you're an adult in modern society, shoulds, want to, needs, ought tos aren't that compelling. If they were that compelling, you'd have done this before. and you haven't done it. So that whole sort of dialogue doesn't work. It's not very effective. And why it doesn't work is that shoulds, needs, want to, unless it's a big emergency or rises to huge levels of importance, aren't compelling. What's compelling is wants. Why you want to do it is going to help you get it done. Thinking about, remembering why you want to do it is going to help you engage in the project. So, example of this, how many of you out there eat Brussels sprouts as an adult? You eat Brussels sprouts if you like eating them. You know they might be good for you. If you don't like their taste, you're not going to eat them, even though you should, you ought to, you need to eat them. Adults do what they want to do. So ways to remind yourself of why you wanted to put this on the schedule, why this task is important for you. To give yourself an active reminder that I would recommend actually writing on the calendar itself, wherever you're scheduling it in, why you want to. Not an exhaustive, think, but just a few words that resonate with you. That you're going to the gym because, hey, you like feeling more muscular, or you like seeing the other bodies at the gym, or whatever it is through your senses, whatever it is through your life goals, whatever it means to you in terms of fulfillment is going to be much more meaningful. An alternative to writing things on the calendar is sometimes, and again, visual reminders are particularly useful for people with ADHD and in the general population. But a visual, if it's going to the gym, you could put a sticky note on your gym clothes of what you like about going to the gym, why you want to be doing that. So using a visual reminder, often you can also put photos on your phone if you have an alarm that's going to go off to remind you to sit down at the paper and to write your project if that's the task. If you can remind yourself of actually once you get into it, you actually like the process of writing, or you're actually fascinated with how Christopher Columbus discovered America, and that's the source of your paper. So again, little messages to yourself about why you want to be doing this are tremendously, powerfully more motivating than all the shoulds, needs, to, ought tos. So that's enough of the W, the S. So schedule, prepare, wants. And the last piece of this is the no negatives. So that's the N, or SDWN approach. So the no negatives means we actually have lots of really good cognitive behavioral strategies for countering some of the arguments that your brain might come up with. Is it really too much work? Well, if you can remind yourself you've actually done this task before, it's not too much work, or we have lots and lots of probably pretty effective arguments for countering every single one of the objections that your brain comes up with about why they don't want to do this task. But again, if you've set 3:00 for writing the paper and you spend 45 minutes arguing with yourself about why you can, why you're able to, why you can overcome this, then again, you've squandered your window of opportunity. So my approach is to tell your brain, okay, the wisest, smartest, most kind, most empowering part of me put this on the schedule. I may, particularly have ADD, have a tendency to discount it and think something in the moment is more important. And yes, if your house is on fire, if you know there's a meteorite about to strike your building, if the dog just barfed all over the floor and you have to clean it up, emergencies take care of. Anything else that's not an emergency, you're almost always better off following that wisest, kindest, most benevolent part of you that put it on the calendar and scheduled it. So the specific arguments I use for cutting off the arguments, and again, there's a self-contradiction that we don't want to get into any arguments, are that telling yourself the very worst thing is, okay, you schedule it, you follow it, you do it, and it turned out to be a disaster. Then at the end of the day, you remind yourself, okay, don't schedule things like that anymore. At most, you're at the time for doing it, not much more than that. The other argument that I've come up with sort of to cut off all the arguments is to tell your brain, wait a minute, brain, the parts that are saying, no, it's not interesting enough, it's too boring, it's too much work, it's not ready yet, we don't need to do it. All of those arguments have been voting. They've been voting 24/7. They've been saying no for days, weeks. Sometimes people procrastinate for years. They voted. But we're telling them, You don't get to gerrymander this election. You voted. Right now, we're voting with the part of you that wants to do it. Again, if it didn't work, if it wasn't a good idea, all you're out is this hour right now. So that's my no negatives approach. So the fourth point of my message. So again, scheduling is number one. Preparing ahead of time is number two. Getting in touch with the wants is number three. And no negatives is number four. And the more you practice this approach, the better you will get at it. And the good thing is life will keep giving you opportunities to practice this. You don't have to be perfect now, but the more you do it, the better you'll get at it, and the more you will accomplish what you want to be accomplishing in your life. So that may be a little shorter than some of the other times, but that's my presentation for today. This will be on the website for people who are just coming in or only heard part of it. So I'm going to read through. I see some comments. Some of them are just echoing approval of what I said. Some of them are saying hello, but there's a little more that I'm reading, and it's just someone trouble navigating the Facebook page. So the little bit of one person's talking about is sort of getting into the shame, the negativity, the dealing with getting in your own way that sort of contributes or builds or adds onto the negativity that adds into procrastination. So what I'll be talking about next week, next Friday, is my task versus test distinction, and that's a way of getting in touch with what you're trying to accomplish, what you are setting up as your own goals, not what someone else is setting up for you. But so often when we're viewing things as a failure, when we're feeling that we've been defeated or stuck or can't do it, it's most of the time it's because we've set up the situation as a test that you're going to either do good at or do bad at. And if you're going to do bad, then you might not as well do it, is sort of what leads into procrastination. So I'll be talking next week about that, and I don't want to steal all the thunder from that. Someone's asking me to go over the known negatives again. So again, the point of it is, when it's time on your calendar, you don't want to engage in terms of wasting time, wasting your designated scheduled time for arguing about why you should do it, why you can do it, why you're able to do it. Although, they may be good, compelling reasons, they may be good, effective arguments, but if you engage in arguments at all, you've already sort of lost the game. You're doing something other than what's scheduled, and what's scheduled is just doing it. The task. So arguing is in some way another form of distraction, another form of engaging in something off task. And here you've scheduled it on purpose to try to achieve or accomplish or make progress towards your goal of the task that you're thinking of. So again, the no negatives is just saying there may be a whole litany of reasons why it feels too burdensome, too difficult, too blah, blah, all the negatives. There may be a whole another better litany of arguments against all those reasons, but at this point in time, you don't want to engage in any of that argument. You want to dive into doing the task. So I hope that part, the no negatives, was clear there. Yeah, so it looks like there's another comment on a lot of the forward momentum is squelched by self-criticism and comparing. And I don't know if everyone can read the comments or just me, because I'm not familiar with this Facebook setup. I'm seeing some comments on the column on the left and some, I guess, is a message right now. So the message I'm reading is, I think a lot of forward momentum is squelched by self-criticism. comparing where one should be to where one actually is, and then that becomes this towering standard, which gets bigger the longer you look at it. So again, part of scheduling attacks the longer you look at it. So you actually only have to look at it when you're about to do it, and you've already set up for yourself this optimal time for doing it. So I would say part of this type of procrastination, where there's a lot of worrying and sort of feedback building into making it bigger, part of why scheduling is helpful, it's not helpful just in terms of helping you to get it done and accomplish it. It's helpful because it's also telling you you don't need to worry about it. You don't need to fret about it other than being prepared and ready to go. You don't even need to think about it till it's time on your calendar to do it. So you don't need to add all this extra negative thoughts and that I can't do it or I can't do it well enough ahead of time if you schedule it. If you scheduled it, it's like the only time I need to deal with it is then, and I'm going to be dealing with it instead of dealing with worrying about it, fretting about it. So that's one place where the scheduling aspect of this on approach helps. Again, the other approach, and I'll be talking more next week, is focusing more on why you want to do it and what it is you're actually trying to do is a powerful way of getting out of a lot of the negativity, because again, a lot of the negativity is tied in with making this a test, making this an evaluation for yourself, or either overtly or sometimes covertly comparing yourself to others or comparing yourself to your past self, or comparisons that aren't useful. I mean, you're trying to do a task, you're trying to accomplish something. You're not, I mean, if your focus is on, I have to do better than X, Y, or Z, that's actually an off-task focus. I mean, when an athlete is doing an athletic event to their prime, whether it's hitting a baseball or running the mile or doing something else, or a diver doing their flips and twists, they're not focused on evaluating how well they're doing. They are focused in the action itself. They're in the flow of doing it. So there's a huge difference. Most of the anxiety that gets centered on, or anxiety is a way of pulling focus out of the task and onto evaluating how well in the moment are you doing the task. You don't want to be evaluating in the moment. You want to be doing the task. It's fine to evaluate afterwards and look to see what you did well and what you could do better. But when you're doing the task, if you catch yourself thinking about how I'm doing it, you almost certainly want to get back to what is it that I'm trying to do? So you want to get back to the what rather than the how well. So I hope I've addressed aspects of that. Any other thoughts or questions? I'll sort of wait a minute and maybe I'll hum the Jeopardy music again. Probably not, because I'm not very good at humming. So I'll wait another few seconds, and then if there's no more questions. So next week's topic is what I've found with patients, and it's the wording I've come up with, is viewing life as a series of tasks rather than a series of tests, and why that can be such a powerfully helpful strategy for negotiating and navigating life. So that will be next week's topic, and if no one sends me a message in the next second or two, I will sign off until next week. Again, this is available on the website. I think we're going to work on also putting them on my author's website. So these will definitely be on the Facebook page. I'll also work on getting on my author's website. Again, my book is Recognizing Adult ADHD, What Donald Trump Can Teach Us About Attention Deficit Hyperactivity Disorder. And if you don't think procrastination had a role in why we've been so unprepared for the coronavirus, then I'd suggest you read the book. But that's all for now. I'll talk to you next week. Bye.